I'm Mikey B, and today we're surfing.
What's up, guys? Today I'm talking about surfing, but it's a special kind of surfing. In fact, it's my favorite kind of surfing, and that's stand-up paddle surfing. In this video, I have 7 tips that are going to help you guys get started, or if you've already started and you know a little bit about paddleboarding, these tips will help you with the surfing aspect of paddleboarding. The first tip is also the most annoying because it's the most difficult, and that's paddling out. The key to paddling out is timing. Timing is everything. Waves come in sets, so you'll have wave, 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 and then the set will kind of take a break and they'll calm down, or the waves will get a little bit smaller and then they'll start to pick up again. So if you time it just right so that you go in that short window of time where there's not a lot of waves or very small waves, you can paddle out and not even get wet. However, if you don't time it correctly, you do have to get past the waves somehow. And unlike regular surfing, which is with a smaller board and you're not standing up on there, surfing, you can dive under the wave with a duck dive or turtle dive. But paddleboarding, you can't do that because the board is so big and it floats a lot more, so you can't push it under the wave. So with paddleboarding, you can either go up and over the wave, which is a little hard to do. One tip about going up and over the wave is you can do it on your knees. However, if the wave is a little bigger, I suggest standing up on your board, finding a nice balance point, and kind of leaning back so that the board comes up, the front of the board comes up so that it can go up and over the whitewash as it comes past you. But if the wave is huge and you're looking at a big wall like this, then you definitely want to just ditch the board and dive under the wave.
Okay, sometimes you gotta dive off your board under the waves.
Keep in mind, when that wave grabs your board, it will drag you pretty far because paddleboards are much bigger, and if the waves are big and you have a huge paddleboard, you're going to be dragged behind that board like a rag doll. It's happened to me a bunch of times, but if you know what to expect and you're prepared for that feeling of being dragged through and under the water, then you'll be all right. But that can be really shocking for beginners. Tip number 2 is endurance. Most beginners struggle with endurance, especially if you're not in great shape or you're not used to long periods of just doing this motion of paddling. Plus, you're balancing at the same time, so paddling and balancing, you're using every muscle in your body. It can be really exhausting. So my tip for you guys is to do it in short bursts. Just paddle, 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 then take a break. Paddle, paddle, take a break. Don't just tire yourself out by paddling and just slapping the water. I've seen so many beginners go out there and they get super tired in the first couple of minutes and then they're done. You have all day long usually, or at least a few hours out on the water. So take your time, take a break, and just paddle a little bit and then go. Eventually you'll work up that endurance to the point where you can paddle forever. But in the beginning, just focused on short bursts of super powerful paddling, followed by really nice resting periods. Tip number 3 is balancing. A lot of people think that this is the hardest part about paddleboarding, but I think the first 2, paddling out and endurance, are much more difficult for beginners. Balancing, it really depends on the type of board. I'll show you guys in another video the types of boards that I use and the ones that I would recommend for beginners. Obviously, you want to start out on a large board when you're learning how to balance, and I wouldn't recommend going out on the open ocean where there's waves when you're first starting out. I'd recommend finding a lake or a nice calm spot of water to practice on and get a really big board and that calm water and just get used to the balancing. You want to rock back and forth, try and find the balance points on your board, see what it feels like to go too far forward and the nose dives into the water, and see what it feels like to go further back. and get used to that rocking back and forth. Try and tip that board over and rock it back and forth like this, because that's what it's going to feel like when you're out there in really choppy conditions. That water is going to be pushing the board like this, so your legs have to move with that water and you have to be able to counterbalance. The one key for balancing that I highly recommend for beginners is using that paddle. I've seen so many beginners go out there and they're just standing on it holding their paddle like this. The paddle's not even in the water and they're not using the paddle to help them balance. Now you can kind of slap the water on either side to kind of right yourself. If you're leaning too far this way, you can push the paddle down and then you can push yourself back. If you're leaning too far this way, you can push yourself down and right yourself to the other side. By now, you've made it past the waves, you're balancing okay, and your endurance is okay. Now it's time to actually catch a wave, and that is tip number 4, picking the right wave. The thing I've seen beginners struggle with the most is actually just picking the right wave. It's not necessarily catching the wave, although those do go hand in hand. You have to pick the right wave to actually catch that wave. If you're picking all these small crappy waves or waves that are huge, then you're not going to get that wave, or you're going to get smashed on that wave. So picking the right wave is key. There are 3 important things to look for in waves: the size, the shape, and the speed. Obviously, the size is important because if you're just getting started, you don't want to go out on a day where it's super big and crazy and crashing on you. So size is important. You want obviously a smaller wave when you're starting out, and experts, you can surf the big waves. Now, shape, you want to look at how the wave's crashing. Is it all just a wall and crashing down? Or is it breaking in the center and going out to the sides? That's a perfect wave. You want the wave to peak in the middle and then break out slowly to the left or right. Now, you can check out my videos on waves where you can learn all about the size, the shape, the current, and all of that stuff. I'll put a link to that video in the description below. Tip number 5 is positioning. Now that you've picked the right wave, it's time to position yourself in the perfect spot on that wave to catch that wave. A lot of beginners don't really understand this, but as you learn how to read the waves and look for the right characteristics in your wave, that size, that shape, and that speed, then you're ready to go. You want to catch that wave right where it's peaking, but it's not crashing yet. And you want to have either an open left or an open right so that you can just go on that wave and actually have some space to move on it. You don't want to catch it and just go down the wave and ride the whitewash. You want to actually ride that wave. In some of these video clips, you'll see me moving to the left or to the right, or paddling a little further out, or going a little bit more towards the beach right before that wave is coming to position myself perfectly so that I'm in the right spot. It doesn't always work out, even after years of experience with surfing, but you will have a much better surfing experience if you position yourself accordingly. Positioning takes a super long time to master, but as you get more experience with surfing, you'll develop this skill really quickly. The most important part about catching a wave is speed. If you paddle for a wave and you don't catch it, then it's either you don't have enough speed or you didn't pick the right wave or you didn't position yourself accordingly. So go back to those other tips and work on that. But speed is the most important part about catching a wave, because as that wave comes up, you gotta paddle super, super hard at that initial suction, because as that wave comes up, it's gonna kind of suck you up into that wave, and you'll go right up to the top of the wave, and you'll be on the very tippy top. And if you paddle just enough, you're gonna slide down off of that tip and go straight into that wave. You'll notice in these clips that every single time as the wave comes, I come right up to the top of the wave, and then I paddle just enough and I slide right down and I go to the right or to the left. One thing that'll help you catch more waves is as you're coming up to the top of that wave, you can nudge the board forward so that the nose has more pressure and the board is pointing downwards. And that's really going to help you get that forward momentum and help you get that speed. Because a lot of the times as that wave comes up and you're still standing on the back part of the board, then that nose will be lifting up and you're not really going to have that forward momentum and that downward momentum. So step forward a little bit more and you'll get that nose to point down the wave and you'll ride right into it. And finally, tip number 7, riding the wave. So by now we're hanging up at the top of the wave and we're just starting to gain momentum and drop in. Now it's time to actually ride the wave. And you have 4 options. You can either go straight, right, or left, or final option is pulling out of the wave. And which option you go with really depends on the situation that you're in. It really depends on how the waves are crashing, so you want to look at how the waves are. Sometimes you might want to go left and at first looks like a nice open left, but then you have to go right, or vice versa. And sometimes the wave is just so closed out where you have nowhere to go but straight, then you got to go straight. Or in that situation, you can also just pull out of the wave. So here are some examples for you guys.
God, I hope I got that. Ah! That was recording.
Thanks for watching, guys. I hope these tips helped you out. I'll have a lot more videos about surfing and paddle surfing in the future, so stay tuned for that. Let me know if you like this video and leave a comment down below if you have any questions. And hopefully I'll see you out there on the water.